Specific Learning Disability by Victoria Perez. Some learning disabilities may include visual perceptual or visual motor deficit, nonverbal learning disabilities, language processing disorder, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and auditory processing disorder. According to the U.S. Department of Education, specific learning disabilities are defined as a disorder in one or more of the basic psychology processes involved in understanding or in using language, spoken or written, that may manifest itself in an imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or to do mathematical calculations, including such conditions as perceptual disabilities, brain injury, minimal brain dysfunction, dyslexia, and developmental aphasia. The term does not include learning problems that are primarily the result of visual, hearing, or motor disabilities, mental retardation, emotional disturbance, or environmental, cultural, or economic disadvantages. Some cognitive characteristics of specific learning disabilities include attention disorder. Attention disorder is when students with learning disabilities typically have problems displaying attention, organization, they are forgetful and distractible. Also, reading difficulties is the most common reason for these students to get referrals for special education. Students display reading difficulties when their abilities to read are much lower than those of their peers. An example of a reading disability is dyslexia. Dyslexia is a disorder that involves trouble interpreting words and letters, causing difficulty to read. Written language difficulties are due to the relation between reading and writing. Written language difficulties usually co-occur with reading difficulties. An example is dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is the inability to write in a coherent manner. Oral language difficulties are defined as significant impairments in the acquisition and use of language due to deficits in comprehension and/or the production across language domains. Those with specific learning disabilities also display social skills deficits. These include immaturity, misinterpreting social cues, poor decision-making, difficulty predicting social consequences, showing dependency, shyness, and naiveness. Also, students with specific learning disabilities have difficulty processing information. They struggle with input, output, and processing cycles. Sometimes these students also display poor motor abilities. This can range from affecting how these students walk all the way to affecting how they write. Lastly, students with learning disabilities sometimes display psychological processing deficits. These limit working memory capacity, phonological processing deficits, and auditory perception. Some emotional characteristics displayed by students with learning disabilities include difficulty being accepted by peers, difficulty making friends. People with learning disabilities have trouble initiating conversations or joining in on conversations or activities. Also, students with learning disabilities are less likely to become leaders due to their difficulty being independent. They also have trouble resolving conflicts and managing their frustrations. A physical characteristic displayed by students with learning disabilities is coordination. Due to their challenge with coordination, sometimes those with learning disabilities may walk or carry themselves differently than most. Specific learning disabilities can range all the way from mild to severe. Mild difficulties are when some difficulties with learning are in one or two academic areas, but they are able to compensate. Moderate level is when significant difficulties with learning require more specialized teaching and some accommodations or supportive services. And severe difficulties with learning affect several academic areas and require ongoing intensive specialized teaching. Some challenges faced by those with learning disabilities are cognitive challenges, social skills, and behavioral challenges. In regards to cognitive challenges, they struggle with reading, speaking, mathematics, and attention. With social skills, they have difficulties reading social cues, interacting, difficulty controlling impulse, and difficulty making friends. Behaviorally, they struggle with attention, their distractibility, and hyperactivity. Although students with learning disabilities face many challenges, they also have many strengths. One of their greatest strengths is perseverance. Due to their goals being harder to reach than most, these students have great perseverance. Also, these students are more empathetic than most because they are more aware of differences. They are able to understand what it is like to be different. Lastly, students with learning disabilities are courageous. They have to try new things daily and step out of their comfort zone. One example of stepping out of their comfort zone can be reading out loud in class when one of their difficulties is reading. If I had a student with learning disabilities in my classroom, I would implement instructional strategies. One strategy I would implement would be chunking. I would chunk their assignments into small parts or break down directions into smaller parts and more steps. This would help reduce their challenges in inattention, distractibility, and disorganization. Another strategy I could use would be the strategic instruction model. This helps students succeed. These models are designed to give instructional methods that will help students read, comprehend, and study better. This can also help improve their organization. Also, to improve classroom behavior, I would have classroom rules posted in the classroom on a sign, as well as explained to the students. This consistency would help my students behave better and have a clear understanding of what my classroom expectations are. Lastly, I would implement successful feedback to reinforce. I would do this by verbalizing proper behavior and academic success, constantly giving feedback, whether it is good or bad, and rewarding students for improvement. For my first person narrative, I read A Special Education: One Family's Journey Through the Maze of Learning Disabilities by Dana Buchman. Everything was falling into place for Dana, except for when she began to notice that Charlotte, her daughter, was not reaching milestones that all the books and doctors had said she should be reaching at that age. This was the start of Dana knowing something just wasn't right with Charlotte. Charlotte displayed some developmental characteristics, such as cognitive characteristics. She explained disorganization, dyslexia, and difficulty with numbers. Charlotte was dyslexic but began to read at the age of 9 with the help from a program called Linda Mood Bell Reading Program. Also, Charlotte had difficulties with numbers. One example was from the book when she was at camp and she was asked to measure in front of the class. She got so frustrated and couldn't measure that she ran back to her cabin crying and out of embarrassment. Charlotte also displayed physical characteristics. One of them was not meeting milestones as a baby. She wasn't crawling when the doctor said she should have been. Also, even as she got older, she walked differently than most kids. The book gives an example of the family on a vacation. It was Charlotte's nightmare. They were going for a run and she just couldn't keep up. Charlotte also displays emotional characteristics. She had difficulty making friends and felt like she wasn't accepted at school. The book talked about many challenges Charlotte faced. She faced challenges making friends in school, staying organized, reading, challenges with numbers, and physical exercise. Although she faced many challenges, she also had many strengths. Charlotte was extremely courageous. She tried new things daily, to all different camps to improve her reading and her writing, and was involved in different programs. Also, Charlotte was extremely perseverant. One example was at the end, out of all of her classmates, she won a huge award at graduation. This made her and her family extremely emotional and proud. Charlotte also ended up attending college even though she had many learning disabilities. Here's a short video explaining what it is like to grow up with dyslexia and dysgraphia and how one can deal with it.